That's what she said. I remember at the time saying, well, doesn't she realize that those interest payments aren't fixed? The Fed is going to be raising rates. I'm only worried about it when interest rates go up. Well, then you should worry about it now because interest rates are going to go up. But this is why the Fed is going to stop cutting rates. It's not because it's won its battle against inflation. It's lost. It's going to surrender. It's cutting rates because nobody can afford to pay. It's going to cut rates to prevent default, insolvency, right? But that's going to lead to runaway inflation.
Could your son be right, where artificial intelligence expands GDP so much that our debt just doesn't matter anymore and everything's great and there's no recession? What are the odds of us being able to escape massive pain? And you mentioned to yourself layoffs and unemployment, which is obviously a lagging indicator.
Yeah, obviously, my son thinks the odds are high. I don't know why he's that confident, but I think the odds are very low. Look, obviously, if AI, leads to such an enormous increase in productivity, in theory, right? If everybody can have their own AI that was so super intelligent that it can conjure up anything you need, almost like, remember Barbara Eden from I Dream of Jeannie, right? Whatever Tony Nelson wanted, she just blinked and he could have it, right? Well, if AI could do that, I'd like a brand new car, and the AI just creates it from the molecules in the air. It creates your food. It gives you everything you need, and nobody has. Well, sure that no one needs anything. We don't need money, right? The problem isn't money; it's stuff. We need things, right? We need food, we need shelter, we need clothing, we need entertainment. There are a lot of things that we need, and we can't have them unless we produce them, right? We don't have to produce them ourselves. Somebody has to produce them, and we have to do something of value to exchange with the productive people so that we can have things. But if nobody needed to work, if we could just have all the things without having to do the work, well, then the problems are over, right? We don't need anything. And then it doesn't matter about, any of this, right?
And you just put your goggles on and get your stimulus check. And
you don't need a stimulus check. Your goggles give you whatever you want, right? The AI is so super intelligent that it's almost like a god. It has harnessed the powers of the universe, the force, right? This is like the ultimate, where it could just give you what you want. You don't have to work to earn something. And of course, people think governments give them things. Government doesn't have anything. It has to take it first. It has to take it from somebody who produced it to give it to somebody who didn't. But in the world of, all-powerful AI, everybody can have everything, because you're every AI. So obviously, we're not going to be there. But to the extent that, look, if a factory can, get rid of 100 workers and replace it with, an AI chip or whatever, it's a computer chip,
an Elon robot,
then productivity goes up. If we could have a much more efficient healthcare system because all the doctors are robots and they diagnose you immediately, or they figure out a cure so you don't even need an operation. They're so super smart that they just, here, take this pill, it'll cure everything that you have, right? All our healthcare costs go down. So yes, you could say that we could get a get out of jail free card from this productivity miracle. But look, I think that there is a lot of potential in AI, and it may take many more years or decades for it to fully develop. And in the meantime, to the extent that AI does eliminate the need for workers, the way governments are set up today, those workers just might immediately start getting government money. It's not like they're going to do something else that's valuable. They're just going to start collecting government money. And that's more inflation. And also, these programs like Social Security and Medicare, they depend on people working for a paycheck. If I replace my workers with a robot, there's no more FICA, right? Because, and so the government loses a lot of that tax revenue. And if they start spending money because they're giving everybody like a stimulus check because they no longer have a job. So in the short run, there could be a negative to the AI, not because of capitalism, but because of government, because of socialism. But the other thing is that AI is not just in America; it's all over the world. And to the extent that the world is a lot better off, then that could be a negative for the U.S. because we kind of depend on everybody else being in trouble because they buy the dollar, like as a safe haven. People are worried about Europe, they're worried about Japan, and when they buy the dollar,
so we're the best of the worst, so to speak. So people buy
there's
the dollar.
a perception of that, right? So if things get better, they don't need it.
China,
but China. But also, America is uniquely vulnerable because of the dollar's status. I mean, it's like, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. I mean, the dollar's status is the source of our standard of living, right? So right now we benefit from the dollar being the reserve currency because we don't have to work as hard as everybody else. We don't have to produce because we could print money instead. And we can exchange that money for the stuff everybody else produces because everybody wants our dollars because they're the reserve currency, not because you can do anything with them. We have huge trade deficits, $1 trillion a year. So the source of our strength is actually going to be our undoing because once we lose that privilege, the whole economy collapses because we've built it on the foundation of that privilege being there. We have this service sector economy, right, where everybody is in the service sector. Well, that's only possible because we don't have to manufacture as much because we can rely on China or other countries to manufacture for us because they need our paper money. But if they don't need it anymore because the dollar has been demonetized as a reserve currency because we've created too many of them, we've created too much inflation because we have too much debt, now we can't import anymore without exporting. And so now the economy doesn't work. I mean, imagine a Walmart with nothing on the shelves. I mean, so all those workers at the store are going to lose their jobs if there's nothing to buy, right? Those jobs are predicated on there being stuff on the shelves. Right? And a lot of the service sector economy is predicated on you already having stuff that you bought. But if you don't have the manufacturing, if you don't have the actual goods, then you can't afford the services. And the whole thing is going to just implode.
So the economy is on the verge of collapse, the dollar crashes. I guess two things to ask is, what can I as an individual do to protect myself? And then beyond that, beyond just me covering my ass, like what can we as a society do to kind of remove ourselves from this centralized government and this impending doom?
Yeah, well, I've been trying to help people protect themselves from this crisis for a long time. And because we haven't had the crisis, people think, well, Schiff's wrong, right? He's preparing for, this crisis that's never going to happen. No, I'm preparing for a crisis that is going to happen. It's just happening later. But all of the things that make the crisis inevitable, all those problems not only still exist, but they're bigger. So the crisis looms even larger than it did a decade ago. We've just blown a bigger bubble. But while we've kicked the can down the road, all these problems have gotten so much worse. And so what this means is that when we have the crisis, it's going to be much deeper because we've dug ourselves into a bigger hole. Now, again, maybe AI could soften the blow. Anything that the free market could do to counteract the damage that government does. I mean, that's basically the dance that we do. Capitalism is a positive force for good. The free market, which is constantly finding ways to increase abundance, make things better, make things cheaper, increase living standards. And then you have governments that are working at the exact opposite purpose. They're trying to undermine productivity. They're trying to add unnecessary burdens and regulations and red tape. They're trying to counteract the benevolent forces of the free market that want to allocate resources and labor to their highest and best use. Politicians want to allocate them to their friends. Sure. Whoever's going to give them the most donations. So
FTX.
Yeah. So
what
government is acting, and then you have the free market that is trying to lower prices, and the government that creates inflation to push them up. So whatever the government, the free market can do to undo the damage of government. But you can only imagine the world that we would live in today if government had stayed at the same size it was in 1900. Had we never had an income tax, had we never had a Social Security, had we never had a Federal Reserve, had the government stayed the same size it was in 1900, which was less than 5% of our GDP, had we had no government borrowing, right? Imagine the world that we would live in.
What would it look like?
Recognize.
Would we have less control of domestic policies, international policies? The idea of government is they're here to protect us, Peter. Who would protect us if the government wasn't as massively large as it is now?
Like I said with my bank, every customer could have taken out all their money, and then the government came in to protect them, and now no one gets any money. For almost 2 years, no one's gotten their money now that they have government protection. When I was protecting them in the free market, everybody had access to all their money at all the time. But what the world would look like. Look, I think that had the government not gotten involved, I think that the typical family today would have one breadwinner, most likely the man, but it could be the woman. But you wouldn't have a husband and wife both having jobs. People wouldn't be moonlighting. You wouldn't have people with 2 or 3 jobs. My guess is by now, we'd probably be down to maybe 3 or 4 days a week working. So the weekends would probably be maybe 4 days long, 5 days long. We'd be so much more productive. We'd have a much higher standard of living. God knows what inventions we would have come up with, what drugs we would have come up with, without the FDA, screwing all that up. I mean, maybe we would have cured cancer by now. Who knows, right? Well, maybe we would have developed AI a decade or 2 ago. I don't know. But I used to watch the Jetsons when I was a kid. Do you ever see that show? So yeah, the Jetsons came out in the 60s, and they just assumed that we would just keep expanding the way we were back then. But I think George Jetson worked 2 days a week. He was complaining about these 2-day work weeks are killing me. And he was saying, look at my button pushing. I had to push the button 4 times yesterday. Like that's all he did, right? It was his job. He worked at this place, Spacely Sprockets, right? They made sprockets. So who the hell knows what a sprocket is, right? It was like a widget, a sprocket.